All right, folks, Mississippi used to elect a number of African Americans statewide to Congress, United States Senate. If the white racists were like, oh, hell no. So in 1890, they had a state constitutional convention to change their convention. Literally, they said, this is to keep these niggas from voting. Point blank. That was the racist intent of the meeting. One black person was there, Isaiah T. Montgomery. That fool voted to keep black folks from voting. That's why whenever we have a Republican or somebody black who screws over black people, I call them a modern day Isaiah T. Montgomery. Well, Mississippi over the years, since 1890, has never elected an African American statewide, all dating back to this convention. Well, there was a lawsuit that said this disenfranchised black voters. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, they ruled that, oh no, Mississippi, they've changed the law enough where there's no longer a racist intent. Really? We're going to walk through exactly what this law is and how they use the legal system, the penal system, to penalize black folks. Robert McDuff is an attorney for the Mississippi Center for Justice. He joins us from Jackson, Mississippi. Robert, glad to have you on the show. First and foremost, again, people who don't quite understand how significant this change was, just let folks know again what life was like, what political life was like for black people in the state with the most African Americans out of all states in America.
Oh yeah, and thanks, Roland, for having me on and for shining a light on this case. It was after the Civil War and during the period of Reconstruction, as you pointed out, black people voted for the first time, and they elected a number of black officials, including, as you said, members of Congress, U.S. senators. And in 1890, Mississippi was the first of many southern states to convene in a convention to change the Constitution to take the vote away from those black people who had attained it in the wake of the Civil War.
And they didn't hide it. They were very deliberate.
It was out front, and they specifically said that's why they were doing it. And they adopted a number of provisions to do this. They had so-called literacy tests, so-called understanding clauses, the poll tax, and in addition, this particular law, which we challenged, which disenfranchised people permanently if they were convicted of a number of crimes, specific list of crimes that the framers believed were disproportionately committed by black people, so-called black crimes. The crime, murder and rape weren't in there. Aggravated assault wasn't in there. But it was a bizarre list of crimes that they believed were committed by black people. It was one of the many tools they were trying to use to take the vote away.
And again, black people were elected in Mississippi. Then all of a sudden, 1890, and ever since then, since 1890, not one black person has been elected statewide in Mississippi.
That's right. It's high, as you said, it has the highest percentage of black people of any of the 50 states. Yet, no one has been elected to statewide office, not to governor, not to U.S. Senate, not to lieutenant governor, not to attorney general. It's a real shameful history. And, you know, the literacy taxes, the literacy tests and the poll taxes finally were eliminated with the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and with constitutional decisions from the federal courts. But this particular felon disfranchisement law is still on the books, and we decided it was time for it to go. We filed our challenge, but unfortunately, as you pointed out last week, the full U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit voted 10-7 to uphold the law despite its racist origins and despite the disproportionate impact it's having on black people in Mississippi.
But you had one of those black federal judges who lit into the 10 for the reasoning.
That's right. It's Fifth Circuit Judge James Graves, who's a native of Mississippi, a native of Jackson, Mississippi, and he, as he pointed out, they upheld it despite its racist origins, and they did so by saying, "Oh, well, it was amended in 1950 to remove one of the list of crimes, burglary. It was amended in 1968 to add rape and murder, and we're not challenging those two, but the original list is still in there." And it wasn't exactly like 1950 and 1968 were times of heightened racial awareness in Mississippi. The legislator was trying to keep black people down, trying to either keep them from voting or minimize the vote that had been attained in the Voting Rights Act of 1965 when they amended this law in 1968. So the notion that somehow that cleansed the tank from 1890 is just absurd, and Judge Graves pointed that out in his very vigorous dissenting opinion.
Now, this was not a part of the lawsuit, but again, because I've studied this issue, Mississippi also has this other distinction in there in terms of how you have to win each congressional district. So they put so many barriers into their constitution to ensure somebody black cannot be elected.
Right. Oh yeah, it's absurd. And we actually were able to get rid of one of the provisions of the 1890 Constitution, which said you have to win the majority of the state House of Representative elections, representative districts, to be elected to statewide office. That is now gone. But this felon disfranchisement provision is still there, and it's a shameful legacy. Most of the states have abandoned permanent felon disfranchisement. There's only a handful that still do it, but Mississippi, unfortunately, is fighting the tide of change, and they're holding on to this racist provision from 1890.
Yeah, and this is the whole thing here. I mean, the fact of the matter is, this is a state that still is operating as if Jefferson Davis is the permanent governor of Mississippi.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. There's all kinds of problems. There are problems everywhere, as you know, Roland, but Mississippi certainly has its fair share. And while we're talking about the courts, as you know, the U.S. Supreme Court recently overruled Roe versus Wade, and there's a lot of talk about, how we want to preserve life in Mississippi from the people who outlawed abortion. Yet they refused to expand Medicare. They refused to expand Medicaid for women in the first year of pregnancy. It's just all kinds of things that are going on there that really do not reflect well on the state and remind us of the sordid history of the past.
So Fifth Circuit Rule 10-7, what's next? Are y'all going to appeal it to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, we're going to take it to the U.S. Supreme Court. And of course, that's not necessarily a good place to go, but it's the only option we have left. And we are hoping that at the very least, at least a majority of that court, and it may not be easy to find a majority that's willing to do the right thing, but we are certainly going to put it up there and challenge them to come in and tackle this vestige of racial discrimination from the post-Reconstruction era. It is a law that should not stand. It was steeped in racism. It has a racially discriminatory impact, and it's really time for the federal judiciary to dismantle this remaining vestige of racism from 1890.
This is so the point you just made, Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals and U.S. Supreme Court. So for all of these people, all of these white progressives, all of these black folks, all of these Latinos and Asians, people who act as if, I can see elections out, the person who wins the presidency gets to appoint federal judges. The Senate, who controls the Senate? They confirm the federal judges. And so if you had more Biden-appointed federal judges that control the Fifth Circuit, it's a good bet the 10-7 ruling would be reversed in your favor. And if you had a Supreme Court that was far more moderate or more progressive, then you would see a lot of these racist laws being changed.
Well, that's right, Roland. And, you know, the reason we have the Supreme Court that we have is because of this unusual circumstance of Donald Trump, with only 4 years of presidency, one term, got 3 appointments to the Supreme Court. That's unheard of. But it was the result of the hypocrisy of Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans by refusing to let President Obama appoint a nominee and refusing to give him a hearing and a vote at the end of his term because they said, oh, well, a new election's coming up. Then when the same thing happened at the end of President Trump's term and the Democrats were saying, do not fill Justice Ginsburg's seat, let's wait until after the election, the Republicans said no. They just did a complete about-face and confirmed Justice Barrett. And so now we have this stacked Supreme Court that is heavily tilted to the right. And, you know, it's unfortunate. They're undoing so many precedents. And we're still going to take a shot. I mean, it's worth taking it up there and seeing if we can persuade them to do the right thing in this particular case, because it's clear this remaining vestige of the 1890 Constitution needs to be stripped away.
Indeed. Robert McDuff, we certainly appreciate it. Keep fighting the good fight. These laws must all be challenged. And for those people who say, well, hey, we're way past Jim Crow, that's all in the past, this is a perfect example how Jim Crow laws are still impacting Black people today in 2022.
That's right. Thank you for shining the light on this, Roland.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Let's bring my panel, Dr. Julian Malveaux, Dean of the College of Ethnic Studies, California State University, Los Angeles, Dr. Amakongo Dibinga, Professorial Lecturer, School of International Service, American University, Renita Shannon, a Georgia State Representative. Glad to have all 3 of you here. Representative Shannon, I want to start with you. Again, we can go through many of these states and we can show Jim Crow laws that still impact folks today, especially when it comes to voting. You had these white racists who used the legal system, who used the prisons, who used jails to specifically disenfranchise, arresting Black people on trumped-up charges on BS, throwing them in jail, and how these laws, and people have accepted these laws as no big deal today without admitting their racist intent.
No, you're absolutely right. Jim Crow is in full effect, not only in Mississippi, but in a lot of southern states where we have a overrepresentation of Black people in the states. As the attorney was talking, I was thinking about how Georgia was doing, and Georgia has not done much better because we've only ever elected 2 Black people statewide in Georgia's history. So CEO Thurman, who's current mayor of DeKalb County, we call him CEO, and then Senator Warnock. That's our second statewide. I mean, I personally think that felony disenfranchisement, whether it be temporary, as most states do, or whether it be permanent, all of it needs to be done away with. Because really, I can tell you this as a lawmaker, the reason that people go to jail is really all down to the opinion of the laws that are made. And so when you look back at certain things like, you know, decades ago, lawmakers would have agreed in unison that marijuana would be a reason to put somebody in jail for a really, really long time. The laws change and people's opinions change. So I personally think that people should always retain their right to vote unless they've literally been convicted of treason.
You know, the thing here, Julian, is when we look at, again, the history, how we are still being impacted. I think about Virginia. When they took the right to vote of those who were in prison. I mean, it was a state official who said way back in the early 1900s, this is to keep the darkies from voting. And every governor kept it. And it was Governor Terry McAuliffe who tried to do an en masse, if you will, give them the right to vote. But they said, no, Governor, you have to sign each individual application. He said, fine. They signed each individual application. And that was a Jim Crow law that was still keeping folks from voting into the 21st century.
Jim Crow laws were extraordinarily effective, and we have to remember these laws were passed not only to keep us from the ballot box, but also to constrain our economic rights. These laws, when people go to prison, vagrancy laws, you could be forced to, we're imprisoned, which means you were working for free, for some white person because you didn't have any place to live. So poverty became a crime. Ownership became a crime. There are several cases we look through where economic envy caused somebody to be lynched. There's a case, the Ida B. Wells case, where a black man opened a grocery store to compete with a white man, got lynched. There's another case where a brother had what they said 400 acres of good cotton land in Georgia, good cotton land. A white woman described him to the newspaper as an arrogant Negro, but rich. He went to sell his cottonseed, and a white man got more money than a store owner was going to offer him. He said he would rather put his cottonseed in the Dam River, term he used, Dam River, than to sell it at a discount. He was lynched because he was arrested because he used the word damn. Cursing at a white person was against the law. And when they said, okay, your bail is $15, this brother had so much money, he just reached in his pocket and said, here. But he never made it home because they lynched him and let his body hang, for a long time. So these Jim Crow laws were meant to continue enslavement by any means necessary. And so for these people in Mississippi to have the nerve to say this law passed, in the 19th century, nothing is wrong with the law because they fixed it a little bit. That just tells you, again, I hate to say this every time I come on the program, Roland, when we talk about Mississippi, but in the words of Nina Simone, Mississippi, goddamn.
We can, and we still talk about, again, Jim Crow affecting us. When you look at redlining, that was literally created by the real estate industry, Congo. It's still with us today. And so whenever these white folks, y'all playing the race card, that stuff, slavery's long gone, Jim Crow's long gone. No, it's not. The residue still exists. It is still present in so many systems in America.
You're telling the truth, man. When you talk about these white folks, I'm looking at the article you sent to us, and whoever the guy's name was back in 1890 was talking about, yeah, we're going to have these laws, even if it's going to affect some white people as well. That was that Southern strategy still playing in effect way back then, right before it was actually recorded in 1980 or so. But here's the thing, white folks in Mississippi, how long are you going to keep playing this game to hurt more black people and not really care if a couple of white people get hurt? This is U.S. News and World Report. Mississippi, number 50 in healthcare, education 43, economy 49, infrastructure 48, opportunity 44, fiscal stability 41. How's it working for you white folks in Mississippi? You're spending so much energy trying to keep black people from being able to be their best that the entire country, the entire state is suffering right now. So when you look at these laws, what Joe Madison calls James Crow Esquire, we see that they are in full effect. And right now in 2022, these guys are going to still do whatever possible to keep black people down, no matter how much they suffer. We're talking about one of the poorest states in the nation consistently, Roland. It hasn't nothing changed. It wasn't like up in the 70s and like down in the 90s. It's always been this way. And until these white folks start speaking up and saying we're going to want these rights and equality for everybody and stop feeling good just because they're keeping black people down, this state is going to continue to be as poor as it is. And I'm really glad you're shining a light on this right now, particularly as we're coming into these elections, because now is the time to really start looking at getting some black leadership statewide there.
Again, folks, this is what we're dealing with. Again, we talk about how Jim Crow still impacts us today in 2022. And yeah, ain't no hope in going to Supreme Court, especially with Clarence Thomas sitting up there with his beat. All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are black beyond measure.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?